Welcome to the Wealth Guide podcast. In today's episode, we have a special guest, Tuan Duong, the principal quantity surveyor and founder of DuoTax. Tuan brings a unique perspective not only as a quantity surveyor, but also as an experienced property investor who truly understands the financial challenges and opportunities that come with property investment. Throughout this episode, we'll dive into common mistakes that first-time investors make, particularly when it comes to understanding the financial aspects of properties. Tuan will also shed light on the often overlooked benefits of tax depreciation schedules, what they are, why they're important, and how they can significantly impact an investor's returns. We'll address some key misconceptions about tax depreciation, such as whether it's only for new builds, and explore the strategies investors can use to maximize savings. Tuan will also explain the critical role quantity surveyors play in helping investors get the most out of their tax deductions, along with real-world examples of how DuoTax has helped clients save. So get ready for an insightful conversation that will provide valuable guidance for both new and seasoned property investors. So thanks, Tuan, for joining us. Really appreciate it. Tuan, I wanted to start off. What are some of the biggest financial mistakes that you find first-time property investors make when it comes to considering the sort of financial aspects associated with investing in property?
The biggest, mistakes. Well, I've seen a few financial mistakes. Probably an insurance one's the biggest one I've seen.
Yeah.
I had a friend that asked me for a conveyancer, and I referred the conveyancer for a new purchase. And in the interim of the new purchase, from purchase date to settlement, there was no insurance in place, building insurance. There was a big storm in Sydney, and it ripped a hole through that roof. It was probably about in the vicinity of, I think it was 80 grand worth of repairs. God. So then it was a bit of, Tuan, your conveyancer can't help me because they're a conveyancer. And I was like, this is the only time I've ever referred anyone to conveyancing. And, usually most of the time conveyancers work out perfectly fine. And this occasion it didn't. And so, on the back of that lesson, I now provide building and landlord insurance in our business. And it's my number one go-to story. When you go purchase a property, sign on a dotted line and pay a deposit, get the insurance from that date.
Yeah.
That's when it's most valuable, because it became a situation of, it's my fault, but you're more than welcome to leave your deposit and walk away. So for all the viewers out there, best piece of advice I can offer, because it's the one that hit home for me most, given that it was my friend that I also recommended, and it was quite a painful exercise financially.
Yeah, because it's somewhat ambiguous as to the ownership of that asset, that property as well. So, yes, it's yours, but like you said, you can walk away from your deposit if you really want to.
Exactly. So it's highly recommend building insurance and of course landlord insurance for people that are renting out their properties.
Yeah, and then as soon as you sign the contract, as soon as you sign on the dotted line as well. Are there any other mistakes that you find most commonly occur? We were talking one about, people that, yes, I can afford the loan, but they can't necessarily afford the cash flow associated with the property. Do you find that occurs as well as a property investor?
Well, because look, myself, I wouldn't say I'm an experienced investor by any measure. But certainly have done a few things myself personally. And definitely stretching yourself is one thing that you want to avoid. But from a cash flow perspective, I think the banks really do have a helping hand in this, in being able to sensitize, your loans and whatnot, your rates, to make sure that you can afford it, even in a rising rate market like now. But it's always something that I think we should always pay, serious consideration to ensure that we're not over capitalizing or over or funding ourselves to leverage. But I guess from a cash flow perspective, I'm the whiz kid when it comes to building cash flow for free. And definitely there are ways to go about building cash flow, but definitely being depreciation is what I focus on. But it's not certainly the only thing that you should be looking at when it comes to funding investments. It definitely is a little more of a keen eye, and I guess that's where you guys come in, right? And having the right team around you. can go such a long way for these.
Yeah, 100%. And I'm sure, Dean, I was wondering if you had any examples as well where you've come across clients and they say, yeah, I've got an investment property, but it's not helping them. If anything, it's hindering them. What are some of the mistakes that you've found that they've made when they've gone to buy investment property?
Yeah, once again, I think a lot of the people they purchased more towards their borrowing capacity. I don't think a lot of them, they didn't really go and have that bit of wiggle room. But also as well, after rate rises had started occurring as well, so I think it started to put a lot of pressure. And a lot of people, I think a lot of the time, some people don't understand. They're like, okay, well, if we buy a property, it's negatively geared, which is great. So we're claiming all these tax benefits behind it, which is fantastic. But then they kind of forget that it's a tax advantage because we need to put money into it, right? So people sometimes forget about that. But once again, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier on, it's sometimes actually a good thing in that as well, because then it incentivizes people and clients to say, okay, well, look, I'm not going to be I'm not going to have a lot of discretional spending. I'm not going to go and waste a lot of those funds. I'll put it away, have it invested. It's growing into an asset that's going to grow in the long term. So,
yeah, wow. But importantly, it's, like if you're talking about negative gearing, you've always got to remember, even if you're negative gearing, like, that's money you've got to pay up front first.
Yeah, exactly.
Put depreciation aside. That's money that comes out of your pocket first, and you want to be allowing the worst case scenario at all in all these situations before you think about, this is great capital gain, huge capital gain, huge tax deductions because I'm in such a negative position. But first of all, you got to think, okay, how long can I sustain that negativity for?
Like the mistakes I've made, if I talk about my mistakes, is whilst I was living with my parents, I bought my first property. It was pretty much a buy and a hope. Like literally I'm hoping to God that it's all going to work out. I thought I'm going to slap a can of paint and I'm going to be able to charge double rent. As it turns out, that's not the case. It needed a bit of plumbing, it needed electricals, and I should have done a bit of due diligence around the budgeting side to go, what does it exactly need, rather than just a can of paint and hope to God that it's going to work out. Obviously it didn't. But yeah.
Going back to what Tuan and Dean were mentioning around negative gearing, I find a lot of people, especially they want to buy an investment property in Sydney and they go, I'll negative gear it, but they don't really consider the asset itself.
No.
And to your point, the work that it needs or the cash flow that goes into it. What are some cash flow mistakes that people consider when they go to purchase an investment property? What do they commonly mistake when it comes to purchasing investment property?
Well, biggest mistake is what I made. I didn't budget out exactly what I needed for the property to be done. So if I had a proper valuer in there and they would have all gone, well, okay, the electrical's shot, you need a new floor, your roof's about to go. So these are all some of the things that you sort of go add on to your cash flow to go, this is all the work you'll need to get that done before you actually realistically can rent out this property and the work that needs to be go in place. So that was the biggest cash flow mistake that I was in my early 20s.
But the other thing as well, people forget about as well, you should always have a buffer. Like I've got one of my properties that I have, all of a sudden the ducted aircon is just shot itself. So there's another $6,500 out the door, right?
At least.
So I think it's important as well that people need to understand that, look, you've got it, it's negative geared. You always need to make sure you've got a buffer in there, and don't always take yourself basically to the limits.
Yeah, because I found, especially over the last few years where we were in an environment of rising interest rates, there were a lot of 2-bedroom units on the market that were recently purchased. And you sort of look at them, yes, they've got a tenant in place, but they're in a position where you can't realistically raise the rent anymore because we've approached this sort of ceiling. And then you notice that insurance premiums are going up, strata premiums are going up, and then interest rates are going up. And then the investors all of a sudden like, I'm tapped out. I've got no more disposable income to fund this, investment. And then they've had to sell it, unfortunately. So I think, if anything, cash flow is one of the biggest issues when it comes to purchasing an investment property as well. Tuan, I wanted to ask a little bit about, on the subject of investors, a lot of investors don't realize that they're entitled to tax depreciation. Could you maybe explain a little bit about what tax depreciation is and what are the telltale signs to look out for?
Yeah, sure. Depreciation in layman's terms is essentially the wear and tear. In this particular situation, when you're buying and investing into rental properties or commercial or residential, that means that the building asset, not the land value, but the building asset itself can be quantified by a quantity surveyor. So someone that's registered by the tax office, that's given the authority to prepare what is a depreciation schedule. And this document that a quantity surveyor prepares, which is the tax depreciation schedule, will outline all the assets within the property classed into two divisions. One's called Division 40, the other one called Division 43. Okay, Division 40 is all your plant and equipment assets, and Division 43 is all your building assets. So Division 43 has 40 has varying asset classes. For example, you've got oven, range hood, cooktop, carpet, and all of these assets have different effective lives. Some will last 10 years, some will last 5 years, depending on what the tax commissioner, hence the ATO, determines how long that asset should last for. And then what we're doing is getting a quantity surveyor, a professional, to go out to the property to have a look at these assets and work out how much they're worth at that point in time, or if at that point in time in which way they purchase it brand new. And so, for example, you might have an asset that's 5 years in depreciable, and the value of that asset might be $1,000. So you will get approximately around that $200 per annum mark on that asset. Okay. And then you group all these assets together, you get a depreciation schedule for that Division 40 table. Okay. But on top of that, you also have that building component, which is your slab, your framing, your roof, your structures. All these fixed structures will depreciate over a 40-year life. And so putting these assets together, you get yourself a depreciation schedule that has all your capital work items, your building depreciation, as well as your plant and equipment assets. So that is essentially what you call a tax depreciation schedule, and a quantity surveyor can prepare that for you.
Do you find a lot of investors, don't realize this, or do you find that they go without tax depreciation schedules?
Yeah, I believe it's something like 30 to 40% of Australians actually claim depreciation. So there's a lot of people that don't know about it, and of course, fair enough, because tax depreciation is a negative gearing tool. It's the only tax deduction that's an on-paper loss. When you're claiming interest on your loan, when you're claiming strata fees or council rates, you have to incur that expense in order to claim a tax deduction, which you're entitled to as an investor. However, with depreciation, it's an on-paper loss. It's a depreciation amount that the quantity surveyor puts on a piece of paper that says you can claim $10,000 tax deduction this year and every single year for the next 40 years. But you don't need to pay a cent off on that building asset or on that property in order to claim every dollar on that depreciation schedule. Crazy, but that's exactly what the ATO allows you to do. And that's probably why they don't advertise it. The only person that advertises it is your accountant. And hence, if you don't have a good accountant or you're doing your own tax return, unless you're doing great research, you probably won't come across it. And even then, I've found accountants that don't even recommend this because they have assumptions, right? A lot of people like to assume, and sometimes they assume, I think your property's too old. Your property's 25 years old. But little do they know, properties can depreciate up to 40 years.
Yeah, wow.
So it's good information. And if someone out there is advising you to get depreciation, we're talking probably hundreds of thousands of dollars.
I was going to ask, what's the average depreciation schedule look like year on year?
So average depreciation typically we're finding is around the $5,000 to $7,000 mark for existing properties. And if you've got a brand new property, average depreciation on that's going to be 15 years in the first 5 years alone. $15,000 tax deduction, which is, to be honest, how I first came across depreciation. I had a duplex as a brand new investment, my first investment in Sydney, and that was the type of depreciation numbers I was looking at. So, from then on, it was just a no-brainer to do the right thing and tell everyone else about it.
It's just so funny. I think as we were standing outside, we speak to our clients about depreciation schedule all the time, right? I use that as an analogy outside when we were talking outside. My clients think of depreciation as a kale, right? They know it's good for you, but they just don't want to do the work for it. They think there is a lot of involvement work required. They're only thinking about the income and not about the depreciation, what they can get out of it. I think a lot of them don't realize they can have someone come out to their home and sort of work all the assets out and do the calculations for them. They don't have to go do it themselves or provide the number themselves. So I think this is fantastic to know that, the quantity surveyor can come to your home and actually value out all the assets.
Because it's got a massive lifetime value as well. You're talking sort of tens of thousands year on year potentially. Correct. Especially for a new home,
Well, put it today, the average investment property probably costs around $600,000 to build. That's $15,000 per annum. Per year we're going to be claiming before over the life of that period of that property. Not to mention plant and equipment has a shorter effective life, meaning that in the earlier years you're claiming a lot more. So the average depreciation is shot up a lot given the increase in building costs from 2021 through to 2024 now. So definitely it's something that's more prominent than ever. When house prices are so heavily inflated, along with construction costs, there was no better time to claim that negative gearing.
So it's not like it's been grandfathered because you bought a property at a certain stage and the property prices have gone up or the cost of goods have gone up by such amount. So there's no grandfathering of it. It's just like they've sort of slapped that amount out going from as of this date, it costs this much amount of money to buy the goods. So we're going to apply this amount.
Correct. Yeah. So it has to be based on market value. It's not based on how much house prices are worth per se, but given that house prices are so heavily as most expensive they've ever been, it means that the cost of purchase or acquisition of the property is so high, interest rates are high, and so hence your ability to claim the negative gearing or the tax deduction against it has more of an impact than ever. But the construction cost, the way we assess plant and equipment for that asset in that particular time has to be based on market value at that point in time. In which case, the newer stuff today would be worth a lot more than what it was 10 years ago.
Tuan, would it be fair to say that I've already got a depreciation schedule for my previous properties? Is it worthwhile for me to do them again?
The only time you need to do it, because the depreciation schedule is forecasting 40 years of depreciation on that property, you won't need to get a depreciation schedule unless you do some sort of fit out or renovation or extension to your property, in which case you can also write off anything that you've demolished. So if you've got a property that's built in 1995, so we're talking about 40 years of depreciation on that, so 2035, so there would be a balance of 11 years depreciation, say. Now 11 years of depreciation, call it back then would have cost you 100 grand to build. If it's got another 10 years left, we're talking about 25 grand on the table. Now, if you go and demolish that house, you claim right off the bat $11,000 or $10,000 worth of tax deduction because you scrapped whatever residual value that was left on that property. And then you would claim that scrap and then also get the new depreciation schedule for the new installed assets or the brand new property that you've built. Yeah, so that's really effective, especially in commercial senses, because people are going to properties, and you probably know this because I believe you just did a renovation in a fit out in your premises.
Yeah.
Claiming, we go into it all the time, right? Even as a tenant, if you go into a property and you scrap something, your landlord is entitled to claim that. Unless it's your fit out, you're a tenant, you've done a fit out, an old fit out, and you want to scrap it, you would claim the residual value of that fit out and then claim depreciation on your new fit out. So that's something that commercial owners, property owners should really be focusing on, because that's a lot of money. I mean, I'm in a similar position myself. We had an office building. We scrapped a fit out that was only probably a 25-year-old building at that point in time. I think it was like $150,000 we scrapped from that property. You've probably been to our office. We've fully fitted it out. So it's a lot of money on the table. If you don't know, you don't know. And the best thing to do is ask the question. But the great thing is, as quantity surveyors, we can still do retrospective. If you do say, okay, I've got a property I did a demo 2 years ago, well, show us some photos, show us some evidence before and after. If we can provide all that, work out some floor square meter rates around that, we can go, okay, well, let's scrap $70,000, $80,000, $90,000, whatever the residual value, we can sort of come up from that based on the evidence that we have.
Right, I see. Mate, thanks for telling me that now.
Never too late.
Well, it's been almost 2 years, so I can still claim quite a bit of it, I'm assuming.
You can. I mean, end of the day, I think the ATO allows you to amend up to 4 years worth of tax returns for complicated tax returns and 2 years for individuals. But if you do go further than that, you can raise an objection form with the ATO and make an amendment to that and then claim that.
Okay, you've got a customer here right here.
Yeah. He's thinking dollars are ticking over. Cashflow, he's king, right? End of the day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Because I guess as a financial planner, you really have to look at a client's case file and understand, well, how can we look to minimize tax and take advantage of all these depreciation?
And ultimately, I think it's more so the fact that we've got to sort of get in the habit of delving further into the question of going, when was the property built? Have you done any commercial, any kind of fit outs into the property that would have added significant value to this part of the property? And then you can claim that as a part of the depreciation. And more often than not, I mean, like even the accountants, most of the time that we've known, sometimes done copy and paste from their last year's tax return to now. And clients forgotten during that course of 8-9 months to go, oh, I forgot to tell my accountant I need to do a tax depreciation schedule, much like I have.
Yeah, so
we'll be chatting.
Also, as well, the question I'd ask as well, say if you've got clients or if people have properties at the moment now that they don't have any depreciation schedules, how would they potentially go about and doing it, even if it's an older property?
Yeah, look, in this day and age, we're so resourceful and fortunate to have the like RP data, realestate.com.au. It's such a powerful tool now. We have build dates on that, which are usually provided by, at time of exchange. We have council information data to show DA applications being submitted. Alterations, additions are also submitted. Everything requires documentation these days. So using this information, we can actually say that any property in Australia, if you can provide an address to a quantity surveyor, they will be able to guarantee you at least a minimum depreciation deduction over the next 1 or 2 years. Enough for you to do some basic calculations to say, hey, it's definitely worthwhile getting a depreciation schedule. We forecast at least $6,500 for the next 2 years. I think the only time you shouldn't get a depreciation schedule is if you don't hold the property for longer than 12 months in your individual capacity or an SMSF. But in every other circumstance, I believe it's definitely worthwhile, especially if you're going to get the cash flow up front.
Today's episode of the Wealth Guide podcast is proudly sponsored by Ryker Capital. In a world full of financial uncertainties, Ryker Capital understand the importance of safeguarding your lifestyle and the well-being of your loved ones. That's why we're committed to providing you with personally tailored insurance plans and financial advice that aligns with your unique needs and goals. Ryker Capital is your guide in the complex world of superannuation and retirement planning. Our team of experts are dedicated to helping you navigate these complexities with ease and confidence. We're here to empower you with the knowledge and strategies you need to build wealth and secure your future. At Ryker Capital, we offer a comprehensive range of services designed to optimize your superannuation. We work closely with you to determine the best contribution strategy, regularly review your superannuation fund, set achievable financial goals. Our coaching and consulting services ensure your financial plan stays on track with regular reviews to adjust to your changing circumstances and aspirations. Don't leave your financial future to chance. Take control today with Ryker Capital. Contact us for an obligation-free discussion about your financial plan by calling us on 1300 179 537. Let us help you secure your finances because you deserve it. Ryker Capital, your trusted partner in financial success.
Is there a limit to the renovations that you want to make sure that you that you include that in this? Is there a minimum? So if I've done a renovation for $2,000 or up to $100,000, obviously $100,000 is worthwhile.
Yeah, I mean, we would do a basic calculation if you said, like, hey, look, all I've done is a kitchen. And for example, a kitchen is essentially joinery work, which is 2.5% rate, right? Because assume you haven't put an oven, you haven't put in a range hood, you've just put a new bench in. That's it. Now, if that costs you $10,000, you could only claim 2.5%, so $250 per year. So then that would be the advice we'd give you, and then you'd go to your accountant and go, hey, I've got the quantity surveyor to assess that this old or this new kitchen that's been put in, whether by me or the previous owner, which is another point I should bring up, is you essentially will say, okay, well, I've got $250. Is it even worth getting a depreciation schedule?
Yeah.
And if, the accountant says, yeah, it's definitely worthwhile based on the cash flow over the projection of you holding the property for 10 years, great. If not, then leave it alone. So it's really up to the discretion of each personal individual as to how effective that tax deduction is for them in their personal circumstance.
Now, is there a method that I should be using? Because I know there's a couple of depreciation methods that I can utilize depending to my advantage, or is there a set that's set out by the ATO?
Yeah, definitely. So they call it diminishing value method or the prime cost method. And just diminishing value method is a very aggressive rate of depreciation versus your prime cost method, which is a linear method of depreciation. Right. Probably only useful if you're somebody that doesn't have a high income. You want to delay the gratification of claiming a tax deduction. Of course. Or you might be on maternity leave for the next 2 years. You don't want to claim depreciation, especially in those accelerated years, which is usually the first 1, 2, 3 years. And you might just want to delay that, which is your prime cost method. Okay, end of the day, you've got to stick to one method of depreciation. And that's something that ATO watches.
But you can't chop and change.
You can't chop and change, correct.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah, but definitely one thing to note is that you can go back if you've got a property, even though it's renovated by previous owners. You can definitely go back and claim depreciation on someone else's expense, correct? Okay. That's something that ATO is completely okay with. So essentially, for the May 2017 legislation says that if you buy a residential property, no longer after May 2017 can you claim depreciation on secondhand plant equipment. Means that oven, range hood, cooktop, carpets, vinyl, flooring, you can no longer claim any of that if it's purchased. You buy a property today and it's already got plant equipment in it.
Right.
Okay. Unless you install it ready for use for a tenant to use.
Okay.
So even if you buy it today, brand new, and you install it and you stay in that property for 6 months or even a day or a week, that's considered existing. And once you decide to rent it out again, you can't claim depreciation on that secondhand asset because you've used it in a non-deductible way.
Right.
So that's something to be wary of. And then the only exception to that is commercial properties, in that commercial properties are exempt from that rule. So they continue to claim to full depreciation on both plant equipment and capital works, as always, no matter how old that property is and no matter how many times it's changed hands.
Right.
So the example I like to use is that 60-year-old pub, it's changed hand 10 times, old ratty carpet, and you're today's owner, you could still claim depreciation at a lower residual asset value as compared to what it was new, and still claim that.
That is wild. Is there anything left to claim of that carpet? It's got holes in it.
Well, it's funny. Actually, now you mention it, it's they've got a legislation which is the low value pooling method, which means that any asset that's worth less than $300, you don't have to claim over 10 years.
Okay.
You can write it off immediately.
Right.
And if it's worth less than $1,000, you can accelerate the depreciation method by having a faster rate.
That's the best thing about those pubs, the old sticky carpet.
That's right.
Your feet sink into the floor. Half the time,
Are you buying Scruffy Murphys anytime soon?
I'm a VIP there. So look, maybe if I'm a property investor at a high level, apart from speaking to you, how would I understand if I'm eligible for any tax depreciation or not?
Yeah, look, there's the existing property quantity surveyors who are registered tax agents required to provide the depreciation advice would know all these legislation. There's a lot of rules in place. Secondhand, brand new assets, cutoff dates for plant equipment. For building depreciation, the cutoff date is 17th of September 1987.
Right.
It has to commence construction from. And if it's a motel, hotel, or manufacturing facility, like heavy industrial, you get a 4% depreciation rate rather than a 2.5% depreciation rate for warehousing, commercial, or residential. So little things like that. Lots of questions, lots of information required to understand, and that's what we do well nowadays. Like AI is such a powerful tool. We've got AI built into our systems where you provide us an address. It pulls RP data. It pulls information from Rawlinson's, which is Australia, the guide for construction costs across Australia. It pulls from the resources, and within split seconds, it provides you a depreciation estimate based on all the criteria. It would be that would be readily available for you to then take to an accountant and go, this is an estimate of where it lands. But of course, if you want something that's certified, that's ready for use, and it's approved by the tax office, then of course reach out to a quantity surveyor such as us, or plenty of providers out there that can help with that.
I think that's important because look, from personal experience, I've done about 5 or 6 tax depreciation schedules all through a year, and and it's well outweighs the benefit. I mean, the cost is well outweighed by the benefit that you receive from personal experience as well. And I think just having that conversation is very important to understand as well, whether or not you're entitled to anything. So that being said, like new build, existing build, commercial property, it's always worthwhile a call in that.
Yeah, that's right. It's really the stuff that's a little bit too old where you're not even sure what the build year is. And when you go into your property and you go, look, there's nothing that's been renovated here. So you think, then you definitely know that, hey, let's probably leave it alone. But the great thing is that it costs nothing to ask a quantity surveyor. And, if we don't have to leave our seat to find out what the depreciation estimates are, we're happily able to help you.
Yeah. Is there any way that investors can maximize their tax depreciation?
Yeah. Look, end of the day, like they've got to balance it between, okay, what's going to yield good rent as well as what's going to yield good depreciation, because that's what's going to pay for the asset in the first place. So, but I always recommend, of course, anything that's motorized in the property is going to yield the best depreciation. So a good kitchen is going to lift the price or the value of the property, but also going to give you very good depreciation on that. They're the type of things that I would always recommend. So definitely having a look at high-end kitchens. If you're looking to maximize the abilities for depreciation, but if you're in a commercial space, doing a new fit out is probably the best value you can get.
Ducted air as well, that sort of stuff.
Yeah, for sure. Ducted air, hot water systems, instantaneous hot water systems. These assets that are motorized, and the reason why I say that is because they've got much shorter effective lives, and which means that whatever you outlay, you're getting that much faster back in your pocket than any other type of asset like carpets. It's going to take you a long time. What else? Door closers, for example, curtains, blinds. They're not motorized assets mostly, and so they're going to take a little bit of time versus these motorized assets.
What if they were electric?
I was thinking the same thing.
Exactly. Don't commonly find it in investment properties, electric
The
blinds.
blanket.
But you'd be surprised. We just did a walkthrough for a customer of ours that had a property in the Rocks, $8 million, and they had wolf, equipment, high-end fridges. It does happen out there, and I mean that's a very rare occurrence.
We're just going to go install a travelator in this house. But in all seriousness, I have seen some homes with elevators and even the motorized staircase as well for elderly assisted living environments as well. So that's probably important for people to note that are building houses of that. I'm sure as well, like NDIS as well, where you're doing a lot of people NDIS where you have any motorized equipment or you're doing any renovations to cater for NDIS tenants.
Even just non-motorized equipment in NDIS, you make a good point there, is because a lot of them, because of the equipment they're required to have is very unique. Like the basins are a certain shape to allow access, and so these things do heavily inflate the cost of construction for these type of properties. So definitely it's worthwhile to get the advice from the quantity surveyor.
Okay, brilliant.
At what stage does somebody need to get in touch with you?
Best I always recommend is when the property has been settled, unlike insurance. You want to wait until the property is settled, and once it's settled, preferably before the tenants move in, so you don't disrupt the tenant twice type thing.
Right.
So we can get in there, get access and measure up the place, work out what type of brand, make and model of plant equipment there is and quantities, and work out the depreciation schedule from there. So it's all about minimizing disruption, especially in the early stages of your rental property. But there isn't a bad time either. But of course, with claiming depreciation, instead of, for example, a lot of people come, oh, look, I've just purchased this property, settled in June. I've only got a month to claim depreciation. Can I wait until next year? You can certainly wait until next year to get the depreciation schedule, because, what's the point of getting a depreciation schedule, paying duo tax or whatever it might be, and then claiming a tax deduction on that, but I've only got a month worth of depreciation claim. Well, the problem is then if you wait for the next year, not only do you finish doing the tax return for the previous year, you've then got to pay an amendment to the accountant to adjust the 1 month of depreciation, unless you forego the depreciation, which is, if we're talking about hundreds or thousands of dollars for even that 1 month, $1,000, that's a decent deduction.
Well, you're going to pay for the schedule regardless anyway, so you might as well pay that in June, because you're claiming that schedule as a deduction.
Correct.
But also whatever the assets left over, you're going to claim that, so it's still advantageous. But what happens to one if I accidentally forgot and I'm just doing it in July, I still haven't done my previous year tax return? I can still utilize that report to then claim for the last year, right?
Correct. Yeah, you can amend up to 2 years without any questions with the tax office.
Right.
It's only once you go past the 2 years for individuals that they start asking questions, and they say, oh, look, you've got to raise an objection form. And the thing with the objection form is it's fine to do. We've had clients that have gone back 10 years because I've never got the advice to claim depreciation and I've never given the advice, so hence I'm going back. Raise an objection form. It's at the discretion of the tax office. That's the only issue with the objection form, is that they may or may not, and hence you don't get the guarantee.
Right.
But with the amendment of 1 or 2 years, or I believe 3 or 4 for complex, you still are able to do that without any hassles from the ATO.
Okay, fantastic.
Yeah. And that being said, maybe Dean, what do you have advice for in terms of, would-be property investors that are looking to purchase an investment property and they want to maximize their tax advantages? Would you, have anything to say in regards to how they assess their particular situation? Should they be seeking tax deductions, or what sort of criteria do they need to fit if they're going to be looking for this?
Yeah, look, I think it's most important, once again, understand what you can afford, what the budget looks like, then work backwards. I think with this depreciation schedule, it's working smarter, right? You come and think of it ultimately, once again, going back into negative gearing side of things, everyone is so passionate about negative gearing so that they can claim those tax deductions, utilizing little things like this depreciation schedule, making sure that they're upkeeping with everything, keeping on top of all their expenses, making sure that they don't miss any of the bills or any renovations or anything that they've done, because I've seen people sometimes do that where they may forget to potentially be like, okay, well, do you know what? I've got building insurance. I forgot I paid that 10, 11 months ago. Do you know what I mean? So just making sure that you've got a clear place to keep all those records, and then you just trying to obviously maximize that, and ultimately the more you can claim back, then the better off it'll help from a tax perspective.
Because I'm sure when it comes to purchasing an investment property, that the potential depreciation that you can claim would work into the cost benefit associated with that renovation. So if I'm thinking, I'm going to renovate my property, but and it'll uplift the value, then any potential depreciation would also count towards that potential value uplift as well.
That's right. So one thing that we have done, and this is at the discretion of the accountant that you use, we will recommend to do this for their clients. The mother, the parents had passed away, and the property there was a brand new property that was built, brand new building that was built on that property. They went on to rent that property out and had a huge capital gains tax bill. But when they got that bill, they're like, but Dad built a house on this. Why should I cop $2 million on capital gains? And so the accountant said, how do we verify, substantiate that their father had built a $750,000 building on this property? And then because we do depreciation schedules, like, well, a quantity surveyor prepares depreciation schedules and works out building costs every day of the week for the tax office. Why wouldn't they accept this? So we prepared a report, got the floor plans of when, Dad was a builder or whatever it was. Dad did his own trade, got his own trades together, built a house for the family, as you do. And we put together a report that said, in the vicinity of that, the property was built for $700,000, and the ATO accepted that as a increase in the cost base and reduced the capital gain by $700,000.
That's incredible.
Wow.
And so this type of advice or outside thinking, yes, it might be a bit of a grey zone for the accounting because it's taken a lot of risks, but at the end of the day, it's a lot of capital gains.
It is. I think, but at least refer and just find out the opinion at least, rather than
submit it to the tax office.
Getting the clients to just going, just pay to Anthony Albanese. It's going to be fine.
Yeah, that's amazing. I'm going to call you next time I buy a carton of milk.
These clients will be like, great, I found this good chump change in here. This time at least it's legal.
That's it. And that's the beautiful thing about it, isn't it? It's just unlocking tax deductions, which we're all entitled to, but not even aware of.
But I think that's the thing as well, right? So if you're working with the right professionals, within the industry, I think they'll open up, and the more that they know, they can obviously help drive a better outcome for their clients. So that's really good.
But I think even us in profession, I think we've got to know, because we do this as part of our living.
Yeah, so I think it's important as financial planners that we have that conversation. And I say this a lot. As a financial planner, our role is, or rather your role is, to essentially pull in those, experts in those particular fields. So, we speak to property investors, say, pull in Tuan, or I need to borrow money, pull in a mortgage broker. I need to save tax, we can call on our accountant. And so it's important that we keep up to date with these little nuances, if anything, around tax or investments or borrowing money, so that we can leverage your expertise, especially if I'm going to save $700,000 in CGT, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So especially, how would you structure that conversation, Ray, rather, if anything, if I'm a would-be property investor and I need to assess my situation, I'm going to say, Ray, I'm going to negative gear, or what are some of the decision points that you would turn around and say, or why investment property, and what would you consider?
Look, I think as soon as a client tells me going, I want a negative gear, I want to first understand the concept of negative gearing.
Yeah.
I think most of the times clients loosely throw around that word going, negative gear. I'm like, well, tell me what that means to you and how you get a negative gear. So when we sort of really break down the whole concept of negative gear, going, well, okay, what does the property look like? What are you going to borrow? So if all the additional expenses from the interest, paying agents rate, water, insurance, this, that, and the other is going to cost you about $100,000, your tax rate's 30%.
Yeah.
So you're going to pay $100 to get $30,000 back. But you're happy to pay $70,000. Yeah. So I really want to understand that concept from them. And I think once I sort of get the concept of understanding of negative gearing at their end, then you sort of put towards a picture to go, well, okay, I think if you were to buy an asset in this vicinity, I think that might much suit your budget, because you're not forgoing your future capital growth in paying that $70,000 every year, or potentially for the next 5-10 years, because you're eating away into your capital growth.
Yeah.
So if you're going to pay $50,000 and you can do that for the next 10 years, $500,000 gone for the capital growth that you're actually hoping to get. So essentially, I think that's where the conversation starts first, and it's part of a tax minimization strategy. Then we start to look at a low value asset or perhaps some other part of this strategy for the tax minimization side. But the big part of conversation does sort of then steer towards going, how's the property? What is some of the stuff that you can claim out of? Are you going to plan to do any capital works on this property? And what might that potential depreciation would look like? And then we'll sort of direct that to my contact at DuoTax, Kim, and I'll pick Kim's brain and annoy Kim a little bit.
Not Tuan?
No, Tuan's just too busy.
Yeah.
That's after hours.
Because I feel that, investing in property is somewhat of a status symbol. And I feel that a lot of people go into it as that status symbol. Oh, yeah, I've got property sort of thing. And they don't make those considerations. They don't, I've got to put in 100 grand to get 30 grand worth of tax breaks back. And then the property has to then grow by the difference, 70 grand, in order for that ROI to be positive as well. What is, even whether considering the appropriateness of that investment property, how is that conversation like with your clients, especially Dean? Like,
it's very important. I think the whole purpose behind it is understanding, okay, well, why are we thinking of investing in property? Well, what's the end goal? A lot of the time where I see, especially, look, property is a great investment vehicle to help from a wealth accumulation perspective. What I see a lot of the traps in a lot of the time is when clients start to reach retirement, they've got all these assets built outside and potentially through property, and they might have a living expense. The ideal lifestyle might be $100,000 a year, but the property's only giving them 50 grand in income. Plus they're being taxed on that too, right? It only makes sense to get to that 100,000 that they want as an income. They might need 3 or 4 properties. They might need to outlay $3, $4, $5 million to get that, right? So it comes down to having a clear understanding of what is it fit for purpose, right? What is the objectives behind it? And then just working backwards of that just to make sure that it's obviously going to meet their goal.
And Tuan, probably last question I have for you. If you had to give a property investor one piece of advice, especially now we're in somewhat of a changing economic climate, interest rates are teetering and, high cost of construction materials. If you had to give an investment property, would-be property investor advice, what would that be?
I really push the point of doing research. One of the biggest mistakes I think I ever did was going to one investment seminar. I won't name the name. And that was one of the biggest mistakes of my financial investment sort of journey. And I think, when you go into these events, you can really get zoned into us buy this, and investment shouldn't be about pressure selling. It should never feel like, here's a limited time offer. It should be, hey, someone who's genuinely trying to give you guidance, and when they do, ask us for a second opinion about it. Because more often than not, there's someone else that has the right answer. And I don't think investing when I started back in 2010 is anything like it is today. There's the amount of resources. Yes, there's a lot more noise, but definitely a lot more places where you can go find genuine advice, especially, with the likes of Facebook groups and whatnot these days. So due diligence is everything, and asking multiple people for the same bit of advice can be very helpful.
Yeah. Sounds like you should have spoken to Ray.
Well, look, in my opinion, I think what the investors should do, they should find a very good quantity surveyor. They're like the Sherlock Holmes of property deductions, if you like. Probably using a lot of dad jokes here, but look, obviously, at least getting a good quantity surveyor, they can sort of find out the right appropriate tax reduction strategies for you, and I think that's key important because you don't want to miss out on anything, especially if you've invested in that asset quite heavily, and there could be sort of a significant amount of deductions to be claimed out of it.
Yeah.
Obviously, I've used DuoTax, Tuan, you owe me. But team at DuoTax has been fantastic for us.
Yeah, but it's also red flags when you go to an accountant who doesn't tell you to go get a quantity surveyor. That's the biggest red flag of all.
Yeah, I think even just to see if it's worth your while, even if you get $1 back,
cost you nothing to find out, literally, except accountant's time.
Yeah. And that being said, to your point previously, I find a lot of people are swayed by going to those events. And like I've seen some promotions for like a free Mazda in some occasions. And I'm sort of thinking, well, what's the quality of the house if you're giving away a Mazda sort of thing? Like free rent or guaranteed rental return. I'm always very cautious about doing due diligence in that respect. So Tuan, thanks very much for your time. If anybody wants to know more, how is the best way to get in touch with somebody from DuoTax?
Yeah, just reach out to myself or at tuan@duotax.com.au, or feel free to go on our website. We've got that great AI system we've built now for inputting your address, and it'll literally spit out some depreciation estimates within seconds. So
Yeah, wow.
feel free to use that.
Great tool. Thanks again. Thanks so much.
Juan.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you, mate.
The information provided in this podcast is for general information purposes only and should not be considered as personal advice. Always consult with a qualified professional or expert in the relevant field for personalised advice tailored to your specific situation.
If you enjoy the content we bring you on the Wealth Guide podcast, we'd love for you to subscribe and share with your community. Let's grow this community together and make financial literacy accessible to all.